Hi, my name is Kieran Frost and I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Sendmarc. Today I'm here to talk to you about the April 2nd announcement from Microsoft where they issued some new requirements for high volume senders, particularly for Outlook. So in today's video we're going to cover off a couple of topics. The first is we're going to talk about Microsoft's requirements themselves. The second is we're going to talk about a key part of those requirements, DMARC, what it actually is and why Microsoft would require it. And lastly, we're going to talk about some actions that you might want to take as a potentially impacted party. So the first question is, what was the announcement? And on the face of it, it's quite simple. If you send more than 5,000 emails per day to @outlook.com, @live.com, or @hotmail.com, you are what's known as a high volume sender from Microsoft's perspective. And what they've changed is that they now require these high volume senders to be sending mail from a domain that has a DMARC record published, and that those mails pass either an SPF or a DKIM evaluation, preferably both, as well as being subject to normal kind of email hygiene checks. If your mails meet all of those requirements, they will continue to be delivered. Of course, the corollary is that if your mails don't meet those requirements, well, what's going to start to happen is that those mails will be routed first into junk, and then at a later date, still to be announced by Microsoft, those mails will actually be outright rejected. So if you're an organization with a large customer base that leverages one of those domains, you are potentially impacted by that announcement. Not even if you're a large organization. In fact, if you're just an organization that sends quite a lot of mail, you're potentially impacted by this announcement. Fortunately, it's not the first time that the industry has dealt with this kind of news. In fact, it's kind of part of a broad and quite proud tradition of DMARC requirement updates. So in April of last year, Google and Yahoo began their enforcement of very, very similar requirements. And almost a year later, Microsoft is joining the fray. And so we now have the three biggest email platforms on the planet, all requiring that high volume or bulk senders have DMARC in place. This is part of a broader tradition of DMARC requirements. So if we look at, to the rest of the world, DMARC is more and more being adopted as a global security standard. For example, PCI now has a requirement that adherents to that standard have a mechanism for ensuring that their domain cannot be impersonated, which is a very long way of saying, please have DMARC in place. And so we've seen these types of requirements be built more and more closely into security standards. And this announcement from Microsoft is merely the latest in this trend. So this kind of begs the question, what is DMARC? The acronym, as many technical acronyms are, is long and kind of painful: domain-based messaging, authentication, reporting, and conformance. But that doesn't really tell us what it is, right? It is an email authentication protocol that protects domain owners from email spoofing and impersonation attacks. If you've got DMARC in place, your domain can't be impersonated from an email perspective. That is the theory, and that is why it is so powerful for people to put in place. It solves a number of the kind of core problems with email. So the first is that it's really easy to send an email pretending to be anybody in the world. This is kind of core to how email was designed. It was designed so that it was really easy to spin up servers and start sending out email, purportedly from whoever you'd like. As a business owner, you might have your Google environment that you use for your everyday email, but you also use platforms like MailChimp to do email marketing. And a platform like MailChimp and a platform like Google are leveraging the same technologies that attackers are utilizing when they're sending emails to send on your behalf. Another kind of core problem with email is this problem of delivery. Often our legitimate mail gets flagged as illegitimate and lands up in a spam box, or worse, gets rejected. And lastly, it's very difficult to know who actually is sending email on our behalf. Now, DMARC solves all of these problems because it requires you to effectively say, hey, to the rest of the world, hey, I'm this business owner, I use Google and I use MailChimp. You're effectively whitelisting those two platforms. And once you've done that, the rest of the world knows to reject mail from everywhere else in the world. Because you're going through this whitelisting process using those earlier acronyms that I made mention of, SPF and DKIM, you can be sure that your mails are actually going to land in an inbox. They're actually going to deliver correctly, obviously, again, subject to those email hygiene requirements that I mentioned earlier. And lastly, if you've got DMARC in place and if you're leveraging, a platform like Sendmarc, you're able to see who is utilizing your domain. So you get global visibility on every platform, the Googles, the MailChimps, the Salesforces of the world, as well as anybody that might be misusing your domain and potentially attacking, your customers, your suppliers, anybody in the world. The damage that can extend from these types of attacks, I think, is quite well known. There's no point in kind of belaboring the point here, but there are many damages that can extend from an impersonation attack, and DMARC is a solve to these problems. So why would Microsoft require that you get DMARC in place? Well, it's quite simple, right? From your perspective, and what they say in their announcement is they're doing this because it's a great way to solve these problems and mitigate against these damages that I've got on screen here. But from their perspective, it means that they're able to give their customers, in the users of at outlook.com, at live.com, at hotmail.com, a better customer experience because they're giving them a cleaner mailbox. So it's very clearly a win-win. When more organizations adopt DMARC, it means that less people can be hit with impersonation attacks that leverage this particular vector. So how do you go about doing this? Well, it's quite an interesting process, and one that we're obviously well versed at Sendmarc. But the first thing that you need to do is you need to publish that DMARC record. Now, the Microsoft requirements is that the DMARC record is published effectively in a monitoring mode, and what we do is we start our customers there. So we start there with effectively in monitoring mode, and we gather reports. So we're able to see who is utilizing mail, who is sending mail on your behalf. We go through this analysis process, and ultimately what we aim to do is identify the legitimate senders of email in your environment and make sure that the Microsofts of the world can see them as legitimate, so that when we decide to increase the DMARC, the strength of the DMARC policy, the strictness of the DMARC policy, we're only hitting the bad guys, so to speak. This is something that we've obviously done for many, many thousands of domains, tens of thousands of domains at this point, and something that we're really skilled at getting customers very quickly through this process. So, if I was to give you one piece of advice, for the non-technical audience, I would say absolutely contact your MSP. They're going to be very, very, familiar with your email environment and are going to be well positioned to make sure that your email senders are all, very well configured. And it's very important that we get started with this process soon, because as mentioned, the deadline is swiftly approaching, less than a month at time of recording till May 2025. And so less than a month to get, any potential problems mitigated. So you need to act today. You need to get that DMARC record in. You need to start painting a picture of how your domain is being utilized. And ultimately, you need to make sure that come May 5th, you are well prepared and that your mail continues to deliver into the email boxes of your intended recipients. Thank you very much. If you care to reach out to us, you can find us on LinkedIn. You can contact us on the contact information that you see below, or of course, you can reach out to your MSP and tell them that we sent you. Thank you very much.